One more prerequisite before we start getting into warping proper is understanding a little bit about Ableton Live's grid in the arrangement view here. So you'll notice at the top of the arrangement view we have these numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These represent bars or measures in the arrangement timeline. Along the bottom we can actually see numbers that are representing milliseconds and seconds in our timeline. You'll notice that if I zoom in on the grid, and I can zoom in a couple of different ways. I can either move my mouse above these bar numbers or measure numbers on the top. Notice how my mouse cursor turns into a magnifying glass. I can click and drag down, and I can zoom in, and while I continue to click and hold, I can drag back up and zoom back out. I can also click to set an insert marker, and I can zoom in with the plus key or zoom out with the minus key. You'll notice when I zoom, I'm seeing more grid lines pop up here, and I also see some more numbers pop up. So let's go back to bar number one here. So we see bar number one, right, indicated by the whole number one, but then we also see a 1.2, a 1.3, a 1.4, and then we see 2 for bar number 2. So what these first decimal point subdivisions are representing are quarter notes. So each single bar from beginning of bar 1 to the beginning of bar 2, for example, is made up of 4 segments or 4 quarter notes. So we see 2.2 is representing bar number 2, quarter note or beat number 2. If we zoom in a little bit further, we'll see more grid lines, and we'll also see a third decimal place pop up. Let me zoom in a little bit more here. So now we can see a third decimal place. So for example here, 2.1.2, that third decimal place is representing the 16th note subdivision of that quarter note. So if I click right here, for example, the point that I've selected in my arrangement is bar number 2, beat number 1. We're still within the first quarter note beat, but this is the third 16th note subdivision of that quarter note beat. Here's the fourth 16th note subdivision of it. And then we move over here. Now we're in bar number 2, beat number 2. So if I want to change my grid, well, the grid setting I have right now is called the adaptive grid. So I can change the grid, of course, by zooming in and zooming out. It will adapt to my zoom level. I can change the grid if I right click anywhere on the grid. You can see in this context menu we have different adaptive settings here. You can go a bit wider with your adaptive setting or a bit narrower. I tend to find that this adaptive grid narrow setting works best for the majority of situations. If we right click though, we also see some fixed grid settings. So let's switch to 16th notes. So that means regardless of how much I zoom in or out, the grid is going to stay locked to 16th notes. So let's go back to bar number 2 here. Let's zoom in again. And then we can see now clearly those 16th note subdivisions. So here's the beginning of bar 2. Here's bar 2. We're still within beat number 1, but this is the second 16th note, the third 16th note, the fourth 16th note. Then we get to that second beat. So hopefully this is starting to make sense. I'm going to change my grid back to adaptive narrow, and then I'll be able to zoom and change the grid lines, the amount of grid lines that I see to work with. This is going to be helpful when we start warping, especially when we're lining audio clips up on the grid, and then when we're working in the clip view down here, you'll see how there's a grid that we can work with down there as well, which is similar but separate from the grid that we see in the arrangement. So let's go ahead and bring an audio clip in. I'm going to go to my browser here. Let's just grab one of these drum loops. I'm going to drag and drop it onto one of my audio tracks. So if we play it back, I'm going to set my loop brace with Command L. You can hear what that sounds like. Let me turn it down a little bit. It's a little bit loud. We can hear what that sounds like, and if I zoom in on the grid, for example, we can see that there's a kick drum. This is a house beat, so we got a kick drum hitting pretty much at the beginning of each quarter note, as would be expected. But let's do this. Let's double click on the top half of this clip. It's going to open up down here in the clip view, and now we see a separate grid down here. Now this grid has the same rules. We can kind of move our mouse above the bars and beats and click and drag down or up to zoom in and out. We can also click and place an insert marker and use the plus key or the minus key to zoom in or out. It's worth mentioning, this is in two different places on these two different grids, but in the arrangement view grid, you can see down here, it gives us the current grid size. And as I zoom in and out and I change the grid, it's changed now to eighth notes. If I zoom out some more, now we have quarter notes. If I go into the clip view grid though, we see that number representing the current grid size up here in the upper right corner. So just keep an eye out for that if you're not sure what your grid size is in your clip view. Now, going back to the grid in the clip view here, this grid is similar, and like I said, similar rules apply in terms of how we zoom, how we kind of navigate through, how we can click the insert markers and zoom around those. But this grid is actually independent from the grid in the arrangement. So right now everything looks like it's lined up. We see, beginning of bar number 1 right here on that first downbeat, right here on that first kick drum. We see that also same in the arrangement. But check this out. If I grab this clip in my arrangement and I move it over here, say to bar number 8, you can see now it's lined up on bar 8 in my arrangement view grid, but it still says bar number 1 here in the clip view. So the clip view's grid is completely independent, and based on the clip that we selected, it's independent from the arrangement view grid. So just kind of keep that in mind. I know that's the source of confusion sometimes for some new Ableton Live users. One more example I'll show here is in the clip view down here in the actual clip, we can change this start marker position. So if I click this little flag here, this is telling the clip where to start playback from. I'm also going to grab this flag up here. This is the loop start marker. I'm just going to move it over here so it lines up with my start marker in the clip. So you can see here, now I'm telling this clip to start at bar number 2 and play only bar number 2, but it hasn't changed its position up here on the arrangement view grid. And in fact, if I move this back over here to bar number 1, it's going to play at bar 1 in my arrangement, but within the context of the clip itself, within the timeline of the clip itself, it's just playing back that second bar. And it's just going to continue to loop that because I have this loop function turned on over here. So I just want to make sure you understand the grid, because we'll be using the grid and zooming in and zooming out a lot as we move forward and start to actually warp some audio files.